and welcome to Girls Talking Business, the program that breaks down business to the simplest terms. Our guest today is a financial analyst, Tosin Olasendi. Tosin, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
So this morning, the National Bureau of Statistics released its quarterly report showing that Nigeria's economic growth rate stands at 1.50%. Now, that's slow compared to the first quarter's 1.95%, and that shows a decline of 0.45%. Now, we saw that in real terms and nominal terms. The nominal terms were higher than real terms. But first of all, just so the man on the street understands what we're saying, what does real term and nominal term mean, and what figures should we be focusing on?
Okay, good. So for the man on the street, the real term basically means that these are raw data, right? Nominal term means that this is raw data, that is, it's not been touched. It is just the way it was extracted from the market. So also a little bit of background. GDP basically means that this is the total price of services and products that were sold in the country for 1 year. So when they go to the market, so let's say for instance, you go into Dangote cement, that'll be a total of all the cements that was sold in. That's how they arrived at GDP, for instance, for Dangote. And you can do that for all the other sectors. So nominal term means that it's not been touched, while real term means that they are putting in the effect of inflation. So that way we can compare apples for apples. So for instance, the inflation is currently 11.16%. And in previous, sometimes last year, inflation was 17.34%, April to be precise. So you can see, so if I'm comparing what happened in Q1 or in Q2 to Q2 of last year, the inflation rate is different, and we need to be able to take that into account. So that way we can compare apple for apple. So nominal, raw data, real, we've taken into account inflation. So it is real. You can compare it across the line.
Oh, okay.
So it relates more with the common man on the street, basically.
Fantastic.
All right, and then surprisingly, we have also seen that in terms of this GDP report that was released by the National Bureau of Statistics, the non-oil sector contributed 91.45% to the economy compared to the oil sector, which contributed just 8.55%. So is this supposed to be good news for us? Are we gradually leaving the point of being an almost completely dependent oil country to the non-oil country?
Okay, on the surface, anybody that sees the report and say, oh, okay, Nigeria grew by 1.50% in Q2 2018, like, oh, okay, it's a growth. Considering that we had a recession just in 2016, and we had a 0.83% growth in 2017. So they might say, oh, it's better than before. But now the thing is this, right? The price of oil has jumped back. So really, we don't have any excuse anymore. We can't keep crying about the same losses that happened in the past. The price of oil is back up. What's happening? So let me break it down. It was 1.95% in Q1, and now it's 1.50% in Q2. So the man on the street, do they know that what percentage of GDP is oil? It's just less than 10%. So a lot of people always thought, if you ask somebody that is a lame, like, oh, what percentage do you think oil contributes? They always thought it was more. But oil contributes less than 10% of the total GDP. And as an economy that wants to look at it, it's already diversified, and truly is what it is. Because if oil is contributing just less than 10% of its GDP, it's already diversified. So now what are we doing to grow this non-oil sector? Those are the questions we should be asking. If you look at the data, over the past 2 years, guess where we've seen our highest growth? Most of this jump that we've seen in these numbers, this dead cat bounce has actually been driven by oil. So in the first quarter that we're able to deliver 1.95%, it was because we were able to deliver 2 MBPD of oil. The last time we saw oil to that magnitude, I'd say 2 million barrels was since 2016 Q1. So we only saw that happen again in the last quarter, and that's why the last quarter was able to give us 1.95%. So we still have our problems. Our non-oil is not growing the way it should grow.
Yeah, I know now it has like an average of production of 1.84%.
The oil was 1.84% for the second quarter. So you can see that the non-oil sector, which should be growing, is not growing at the pace that it should be. It's too little. When the president, when the federal government had the EGRP, they were predicting 3.5%. What are we sitting on? 1.5%.
That's a very slow growth.
Yeah, it is a slow.
Yeah, but then some analysts have attributed the slow growth rate to the delayed passage of the budget, and some have even attributed it to the monetary policy rate. Yes. What would you attribute it to?
The monetary policy, the policies plays a very huge role because, like I said, they don't have any excuse anymore. Now, I mean, look at all the time we wasted in order to stabilize our currency, and you can see what has happened in the past in terms of the GDP and how the inflation danced in the past because of those poor policy. So, like I said, every other country that is an oil producing nation that also went through the recession with us, they've bounced back. Look at Egypt. Look at all this. They've bounced back. Nigeria is literally the only one still giving us these disappointing numbers. So our policies is at play here. What are we doing about our policies? Look at the agriculture we've been spending so much money on. Look at that growth.
It was
very mild. Yes, it was a slow growth. So if you look at like agricultural sector that we are hoping that we've put in all this energy. So the question is, number one, the policies. Number two, the execution. What are we doing wrong? Why aren't we seeing those numbers jump through in industries and agriculture?
True.
Yeah.
But talking about agriculture now, some people argue that most of the food-producing states are the states that are facing this, the
up north
herdsmen and the farmers' clashes. So would you say that has contributed to it, or?
I would wait, like data is king, right? So our data, like if you see the numbers for livestock and all this kind of, all the other things that contribute towards agriculture, the growth is slower, right? So data don't lie. Now the thing about data is they will tell you that this dropped, that dropped. Why did it drop? I guess we need to start asking those questions. Yeah, so I just don't want to thumbs up and say, oh, it's because of the unrest, but there has been those drops. So what is driving those drops? Why are we seeing a drop in those numbers?
All right, and then we have also seen a whole lot of foreign capital flight in recent times, like a whole lot of it. Can we attribute these reports, the GDP report, to the foreign capital flight as well?
No, I wouldn't use that word. There are two things at play. Number one, this is a cycle. An election cycle signifies instability. The market hates it. They love stability. They love to be able to project. So really don't know what's going to happen. Is Buhari still going to be president? Are we going to have a new president? So now because of that uncertainty, people will always fly to safety. That's what happened. Then number two, the return in developed market is better. So why do they have to take this enormous amount of risk for it might come true, might not come true, and they might just as well go back to their developed market that has a better return and is safe. So you understand. So two things are not in our favor: uncertainty driven by political risk and an election year, and then number two, the developed market is actually posting better numbers.
Okay, but speaking about elections, some people have said the forthcoming elections will boost liquidity and help the economy grow. Is that
why? How? Why? By spending towards election, but it doesn't. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't, but where is this boosting liquidity to? You understand? Where is the money changing hands? What sector? Are we spending that money to do construction? No. Well, what? It's advertising. It's paper. It prints papers. It's what? Cash, what do they call that thing? Cash back. Get cash for votes or whatever the case may be. So I guess we have to wait and see. But it's so funny how Nigerian Stock Exchange went from being the best, we're the second best stock exchange in the world last year, right after Argentina, and now we're doing terribly, one of the worst.
Yeah, so that was what I was going to ask, because I've been visiting stock exchange very frequently, and then I realized that our market capitalization has really dropped, and then like the stockbrokers on the trading floor have said, a lot of foreign capital flights, and then it's affecting them as well. Yeah. But then you just said that politics, one way or the other, shouldn't really affect.
No, I said it is affecting. I'm saying uncertainty is playing a key role here. There are two things: uncertainty, and then number two, the developed market is having a better return. So opportunity cost. Why should they be in an uncertain market when they could be earning relatively good returns in a developed and safe market?
But then really, my question, which really bothers me, is why should politics play such a major role in the economic growth of our country?
Anybody that actually asks that question is, if we think it shouldn't, then we're in denial. Politics actually plays a critical role.
Oh, indeed.
I wouldn't put my money somewhere if I cannot vouch for the politics, and that is why whenever we look at the way the way your politics, look at what happened with China, when the Trump and China were going back and forth. So the trade impact. There's a cost. There's a cost for those things. So especially for foreign investors, they love to get the pulse of the politics of that. Yeah, that is stability. Yeah, how does it? What is the authenticity about politics? Imagine somebody just goes and closes down a store of a multinational. If I'm a multinational that want to enter that country, guess what? If they could treat X like that, they could treat Y like that. So these are the kind of things they look out for. Policies, foreign exchange. If I want to exit the country, what happens to my money? Would it be devalued or not? So these are the kind of things. Policies. Fiscal policy, monetary policy, they need to go hand in hand. We've been seeing more of monetary policy as opposed to fiscal policy. But we need to see both of them going hand in hand. Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to the next topic, which is on inflation. We know that the last report showed that our inflation also dropped by 11.14% against the 11.23% that it was the month before. Now, for me and those out there, the cost of things in the market still remains the same or higher. The cost of pharmaceutical products are increasing or the same, and then the cost of my hair extension, let's not go too far, the cost of my extension is still very high. I don't think it's the same price it was the last time I went to buy, right? So how would you explain the fact that inflation is reducing and then the cost of things in the market are still very high?
Okay, so we're going to address these things one after the other. First of all, inflation reducing. So whenever people hear that there was a drop in inflation, they always think, oh, inflation has dropped. No. What is actually happening is that inflation is still growing. It's only growing at a slower pace. So in the prior quarter, it was 11.34. What was it in the prior quarter?
11.23.
Sorry, 11.23%, and now it's 11.16%. It simply means that it's 11.14%. It simply means that we are growing, but at a slower pace than we grew in prior months. That's all it means. The prices of goods and services are still growing. If it were to be going down, then that would have been a deceleration. So we still have inflation, and I think that's what we need to communicate more to more people. And also, if you're talking about products that, okay, how come my hair prices and things like that? If you look at the basket in which that they used to arrive at this number. So what basically happens is that there's a basket, and the basket has different items in it. And now based on that basket, then they arrive at this inflation number. 50% of this basket is actually what? Food. So this inflation do you spend 50% of your income on food? So this usually is for low-income earners. So people that earn 20,000 naira, people that earn 50,000 naira, people that those are the people that this inflation is more. It hits them more. It tells their story. You understand? So for you that do not spend 50% of your income on food, you probably would have a different average inflation as opposed to somebody whose lifestyle mimics the basket. Exactly. So maybe what you're spending on like imported products has a higher inflation rate than food.
Locally
exactly. Then you'll be seeing a difference. You understand? So it's not cut. It's a basket that has different items at a different kind of rating, and we have to look at the man on the street. The average Nigerian, you heard that that just 5% of Nigerians have over 500,000 naira or more in savings. So we always have to be careful that just because we're doing okay doesn't you understand. So that man on the street, that person earning 20,000 naira, they would feel it more, or the inflation rate is more representative of them. Yours and I, most likely higher.
Okay, yeah, you've talked about food, but then one would want to ask, what factors actually influence inflation? What do they use to measure inflation?
They measure everything.
Okay.
From imported goods to carpentry to furniture, just that they do it at a different rating, at a different size. So now we've got a basket and 50% of it is food. Let's say 20% is imported product. Let's say 5% is education. And it's just like that. So now, exactly. So now if I were to look at it at my personal life, I'll probably say, I actually spend more on imported products. I spend less on food, and my story might be different, but this is an average so that we can capture the average Nigerian, so you can tell an average story.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and then for Nigeria, some people would say, we've had issues here and there, issues of insecurity and the rest of it, and they may be affecting our inflation rate. But then we look at our neighboring African countries. We see Rwanda, its inflation rate has really dropped, and then we would not say that it has not had its share of issues as well. So what would we say that Nigeria is really doing wrong?
Okay, to be honest, government plays a key role. policies and things like that. So we need to be deliberate. It needs to be very, 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 very deliberate with all hands on deck. So now, for instance, something like budget, right? So this spend is supposed to pass through and fix certain issues, or about being, for instance, look at our interest rate. Our interest rate, monetary policy rate is at 14%.
14%. That's high.
If the regular man on the street wants to take a loan from a commercial bank, we're talking about 24%.
Yeah.
So how much of that money goes into the real economy? Things like that. Those are we have to be very, very deliberate about growing that economy, putting all hands on deck and solving the critical and structural issues. So somebody was asking me the other day, so why can't I get a single-digit loan to actually start my business? Like, the monetary policy rates, even the banks are taking from CBN at 14%, so how would you get it if it's not going to be an intervention? And we can only do so many interventions.
Anyways, I know that there's this thing with agriculture now. You can get a loan at a single digit rate, 9%. So
yes, there are lots
nice.
of, you know that our Central Bank of Nigeria has so many interventions, but now the question is also things like success rate hasn't been followed through and things like that.
Yes.
Also, there's some mortgage rate. I know that there's another mortgage rate that is a single digit. The question is how many people can actually access those things. Wouldn't it rather be in everybody's best interest if we actually fix the structural issues, so that way I don't have to access an intervention and I could just go into the bank, be able to get straight up and get a loan for my business that is at a favorable rate.
At least that way I profit and I'm able to create more jobs. Personally, I feel like that's one of the ways I can create more jobs.
Informal sector actually plays a critical role in a country like Nigeria. Our SMEs are...
Which I feel like we should pay a lot of focus on.
Our SMEs they're the largest creator of jobs in the market. So what are we doing to them? Like when the whole Forex market was doing its dance, it hit them more. They couldn't afford to buy those things and they couldn't afford to keep those employees. So yeah.
But Tosin, in your opinion, do you think the target for the single digit inflation, is it feasible? Is it possible?
It's possible if we put all hands on deck and if we combine monetary policy and fiscal policies as well. We cannot just if it is falsified or if it is a temporary solution, it wouldn't, we've had single digit. When was that? That was just in 2016 or so. We had a single digit inflation rate. Exactly. It's not like it's not something we've ever seen before. Yeah. So it will never work in isolation. It's not like, when I was a baby, that was when we had single. It was just about a year or so, or 2 years ago, we had single digits. Exactly. So it's not just about single digit. How does it affect the man on the street? How are we changing lives? How are we changing the economy? How are we translating that into growth? We need growth. We literally look at the average growth rate this year, and it's about 1.7% thereabout. We cannot afford to be doing sub 2% growth. We actually need that growth.
Exactly. And then at least I know that when a country's GDP does not grow as much as the people's population, exactly, then there's a problem.
Absolutely. Right? You've raised a very valid point. Population is growing at 3%?
Yes.
And GDP is growing at what? It was 1.5% this quarter.
Yeah.
There's a disconnect.
So
and also you saw that Nigeria is now home to some of in terms of percentages, we have the highest percentage of poorest people in the world.
Yes, and then I feel like with these indices that we just raised, a 3% population growth rate, and then a 1.5% GDP growth rate, except there's either a balance or an increase in the GDP, then you can now see a ripple effect on,
and also there's also statistics to back that there's a correlation between GDP growth and employment. So if we see our GDP growing sustainably by diversifying and going into the real economy, we can also see a higher number in employment rate.
But on a lighter note, though, some people have argued that we should adopt China's policy of, one child per family.
in your dreams.
Yeah, it's so. I know we're having this conversation with someone the other time, and it's so funny how this is, in the sense that Nigeria has 10 million children that are out of school. Somebody did a naming ceremony for that child when that child was born. We love children. It's a source of joy.
We feel like it's
a cultural thing. Yeah. But guess what? Somebody celebrated the birth of those 10 million children that are walking the street and they don't care about them anymore. So what are we going to do? How do we then actually start? You don't need to have all these kids. True. You don't.
Yeah, true that. So let's close with this. Tosin, kindly simplify a financial term for us.
I will talk about inflation. So what is inflation to me? Inflation basically means the value, the increase in prices of goods and services and the value of my money. So let me give you a raw term. Let's say I'm currently paying rent of 500,000 naira in 2018. And in 2020, my landlord increases my rent to 700,000 naira. I want to be able to have invested my 500,000 naira rent now to be able to give me a return of 200,000 so that when it's time to pay my rent, I'm not touching fresh money. So that might sound very simplistic, but in raw terms, basically inflation means that I want my money to do for me today what it will do for me in the future. I want it to be constant. So my money should always be able to do for me what it can do for me today and do the same thing for me in the future.
Thank you so much,
You're
Tosin,
welcome.
for joining us here
You're
today.
welcome.
And that's it on Girls Talking Business here on Plus TV Africa. I am Iron Obani.
And I'm Edidi Ongiwang. See you next time.
Bye.